Hey class, it's Bill Berry with the third video of our Intro to Chapter 3 project, which is our realty home commission sales calculation. So we've come a long way actually. We have looked at our project spec, we've understood the inputs, we've designed an algorithm and came up with our pseudocode. We've used that pseudocode, or actually we've used the spec to prepare our test cases to figure out what the boundaries are going to be, to understand calculating the results, and then we actually looked at some test cases so that we know that once we write our code we'll have some sample data and we can go test and start verifying that at least these valid inputs at the boundaries are going to work. Sure, we'll have more testing to do, but this is a great start for valid functionality. Next step is coding, so let's talk about how to start that. I'm going to start Python and I'm going to put it up in the corner. First thing that I do is say File, New File. I'm going to put that in the corner. First thing I always do is save, right? I'm going to put this on the desktop and I'm going to say something like blah blah blah, and notice I have recipes here. It's going to make me hungry. All right, so I'm going to say realty, Rihanna's realty. I'm going to put that on my desktop and there I go. Now that's going to be saved. Cool. All right, so I have my code window ready and then I can just press Control S anytime. Now of course somewhere I'm going to put my pseudocode right next to it. So in this case I'm going to go grab my pseudocode and let's take this part first. Grab this, I'll come to here, I'll paste it. In fact, I'm going to paste this. Here's a nice trick. If I put 3 of these guys, that's going to start a section of pseudocode, a section of comments, so I can do that. I'm going to come back here, I'm going to do this and grab all that, and I'm going to paste that. Now I have all my pseudocode and it's in a nice block of comments, so I don't have to go comment each line. Super cool trick. And that's all I need for now, so I'm going to come back and be ready there. Okay, cool. So now the first thing that I'm going to do is the easy stuff, and that is I need to make sure that let's see what I want to do here. I want to get the inputs, right? I'm going to do that one first. So I'm going to start a main function. I'm going to say define main, and I'm going to say, let's say sales price equals, and I'm going to enter sales price. Cool, going to do that, and then I'm going to close that, and that's great. Well, I do want to end up with a floating point number, or maybe just an integer is fine for this, right? So maybe an int is fine. So I'm going to say int, and I'm going to turn all that into an integer. Now I'm going to do a similar thing. In fact, I'm just going to cut and paste that, and I'm going to say days on market. Days on market equals int, enter days on market. And I'm going to do the same thing with the last one, which is days to closing, and I'm going to say enter days to closing. Okay, now just because this is the way I am, I like to make this code super easy to read, and I want to also make it to where the user sees everything's going to be lined up in the user input, so that's going to make that happen. Oops, and I have DAX days on market. Cool. All right, let's fix that. There we go. So now I have my inputs. I could stop and test that, but those are pretty straightforward, so that's great. Next thing I'm going to do is start addressing this pseudocode here. I'm going to take this pseudocode and start transferring it into real code. And so what can we do? Well, we're going to say sales price, right? That's the variable we chose. If it's less than or equal to 400,000, make sure you get the right number of zeros. Then I want to say commission. I'm gonna calculate the percentage, right? So we can certainly calculate a commission percent. Why don't I calculate the whole commission? Well, rather than doing all the multiplying line by line, I'm going to do the same multiplication for all of these, right? So if I just make sure I have the percent in hand, then I can do the multiplication once, which will make it easier if I have to make some changes to that calculation later. So I'm going to say then the commission percent is going to be set to the value 0.1. Right? Now, rather than doing a nested, right, I could certainly come back here and say else, and then I could put another if, right? But I don't want to do that. Rather, we know that there's a nicer way to do this when it's mutually exclusive in a little set like this. So I'm going to use elif, which is going to make it easier to read and less indented. If it's this, then commission percent equals 0.09. And okay, so I get that one, and then I'm going to say That works fine. I'm going to come back, elif, and I'm going to continue likewise. 0.08, and then the last one. Notice on this last one, I don't need to put another elif, right? Because I know there's only one more left. So we see that here, right? We can just use an else. So I'm just going to say else commission percent equals 0.07, right? I would want to keep this all visible the whole time, so I'm following what's here, and I could even put this up here and start translating it into code line by line, right? Literally taking out a line and turning it into code. So have I faithfully executed my pseudocode, right? So I think, let's verify this, right? 10% of sales price, commission percent is 1. If sales price is less than this, then that's fine, that's 9. Yes, I think I have faithfully executed this. And then later down the line, I can actually do the calculation because I have the percent in hand. Now, this of course is wrong. I need to indent, right? We're in Python, so we've got to have this as part of main, so it has to be over here. Cool. Now I'm going to do the same thing. In fact, I can go get rid of this. This isn't useful in terms of having comments or something like that because I've literally translated it into code. So I don't really need to keep that like I might in some other cases and turn it into comment headers. Now let's do the next part. If days on market, right, that's the variable that I'm using here. If days on market is less than or equal to 7, then I'm going to say days percent equals 0.0025. This is 1/4%, right? So it needs to go over there. Now I'm also, while I'm here, going to say if days to closing, right? That's the variable I used here, right? If days to closing is less than or equal to 30, then I'm going to say closing percent equals 0.0025, right? Then I'm ready to come back and do my next elif. All right, this is all stuff that belongs with the first clause, the first option, which is it's less than or equal to 7 days on the market. Then I can continue and say if days on market is less than or equal to 30, then days percent equals 0.0. And last but not least, we can say else. Else. Now this is the place where I've said I'm going to put the next one in just for a placeholder, right? So we talked about that, days percent equals 0.0. That way when somebody looks at this, they don't think that we've missed a range and forgotten something, right? Even though it's not in the spec, it's implied and it might make it more readable, so let's leave it in there. And then we know for sure days percent equals negative 0.001. Now, the other thing that this helps is we know that days percent gets set to something in this block, right? There is no way you can come out of this block of code with days percent being null, right? Being not having a value at all. So that's going to be useful in calculation. But that's not the same for this. Notice we've only set closing percent here in this case, but in all of the other cases, closing percent is not going to be set. And if we go and try to use that in a calculation, we're going to get some weird thing about, trying to use it before it's set, or it's going to give us some weird result we don't like. So to solve that, we could, if we were being rookie, we would go and put something like closing percent equals 0 in all of these cases, right? We would copy it and paste it here and paste it here, but that's really not necessary, right? Instead of doing that, why don't we just come up here and say, look, closing percent starts at 0. And unless we set it to something else in the process, we don't have to set it. Just leave it at 0. So this guarantees, if we look at this code carefully, and I can get rid of all this now because we've moved it over. We're going to verify that it's right, and then we're good. So if we look at this code carefully, we cannot get out of this without having commission percent set to a valid value, days percent set to a valid value, and closing percent. They're all set. And then we can certainly come back now and do our actual calculation. So we can say commission equals, we're going to take the sales percent, the sales price, times the commission percent. And then we're going to add to that. And we can put it in parentheses. We don't have to, but if we think it'll make it easier to read, we can certainly do that. Plus sales price times days percent plus sales price times closing percent. Now, if we think this is getting a little long, it probably is. We can always come back, remember, and split the line using this, and then we can put the rest on the next line. So I can split it here and then say this. That works pretty well. The other thing, we were told we need to integer all of that. So we could either integer each particular piece, which might actually be more correct, but there's not going to be that many, fractional things along the way. Let's put it on each piece. That's probably a good way to do it. Plus int of that, plus int of that. Again, being who I am, I like these things to be super lined up and easy to read, so I'm going to move these things over and line them up so it's very clear what I'm doing in this piece. And then last but not least, I'm going to print the commission, spell it right maybe, commission will be, and then put a $sign, and then I'm going to maybe I'll be nice and put commas in there, right? So I could do format commission, and I'm going to say comma 0.0f, right? And make it a separator of that so that I don't get extra commas, right? I don't want to have a space between the $sign and the value here, right? The number. So I'm going to make the separator be nothing. Now, we think that's all we need to do, so if we simply save this, and let's first make sure we don't have syntax errors. All right, so of course I do. I've forgotten something like that. Have I forgotten any more of those? I don't think so. Save it again, run it. Okay, what's wrong? Invalid syntax. Okay, it doesn't like me putting this here. It needs to put it here. Okay, fine, and it needs to have this, and of course, this doesn't have colon, right? All right, try that again. Now we're going to do our first test. Remember, we have test cases sitting here, right? We can see for sure what those things ought to be. So we know if I type 400,000, 31, and 31, okay, I have days is not defined, so I have a mistake here, and that's going to be on line 22. Notice that I have a way to go to line 22. I can do Alt G, and I can put 22 and jump to that line, and it's not days, it's days on market. Cool. Try again. 400,000, 31, 31. Now this says it's 40,000. What do test cases say? Test cases say it should be 40,000. Okay, let's go run another one. Let's do the one more dollar and see if we get 36,000 out. Okay, so I'm going to come back to my code, run it again. 31, 31, sure enough, 36,000. Cool. Now, this is a real pain to run these test cases, right? Because to see if they're all right, you've got to go run all of your test cases. You're going to go and run 25, 30 test cases. That is no fun to do, and after you run them once, you're not going to want to run them again, but you should. Let's say you go reorganize the code a little bit, you move it into functions, you make some little tweaks. You're not going to want to go and run these all again by hand, but you really should, to make sure that whatever you think is a, quote, little tweak doesn't really mess you up. But so this is why putting this into code, making it where you can run them by just running one command, makes it so much easier and so much nicer. So we'll talk about that in a subsequent video, and I'll show you a method to do that, because I think it's a really useful thing. And again, as a programmer, if you go that direction to become a programmer, you have to know how to do that, and you have to be prepared that that's just the way life is going to be. So that looks great. Our code looks good. We probably don't need a lot of commenting here, right? We could put something here that says handle base commission, and we could put another one here that says handle bump from or additions, subtractions from speed of sale / closing. And we could make one up here that says input data from user, and we could add one here that's, we could say calculate. I don't think there's any more, really. I don't think that's any more commenting makes any sense here, except maybe that, right? The rest is so obvious from just the way it is in our variable names, etc. So that now brings us full circle. All right, we've started all the way at the beginning. So we started with the spec, we talked about algorithms, we wrote our pseudocode, we did some test cases and figured out what exactly those needed to be so we wouldn't get distracted once we got here. We wrote this into code, turning our pseudocode into code, and then we started running some tests so that you could see how that could work. So we have come full circle and implemented the entire project start to finish. That's cool. So hope that's been useful to you. I'm going to make one more supplemental video just because I think the test idea is so important to you. So I'm going to show you the next concept, which would be what could we do if we wanted to test these things in an automated fashion, if we wanted to test it with code, which is the way of the world, which is the way that professional programmers would want to do this. So we will do that as the next video, but I appreciate you watching these videos, and let me know if you have questions or comments on these in the forums or in email. Thanks for watching.